Bismillah and alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. For our non-Muslim guests, that basically is a form of greeting that we begin with, which means may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for turning up today. And for a university ISOC event, this is very impressive, the turnout and the interest that people have shown in such an event. So I commend you guys for that, because you don't see much of this in other parts of the country. That being said, the topic today is the purpose of life. Right? Now, my objective today is to just share some ideas and thoughts with you, right? With Muslims and our non-Muslim guests too. I just want to share some things which I believe are quite relevant, can trigger further thoughts, can trigger further inquiry into life and the meaning of life. And that's simply what I'm here to do today. And before I do that, I want to ask everyone a question. Who has thought about the purpose of life or their own purpose of existence before? To some extent, to some level. Most of us, right? And it's interesting when you look at this, because the fact is that throughout history, throughout the ages, one of the core fundamental questions that humanity has asked itself has been in regards to, why are we here? What's our purpose? Who am I? Where have I come from? Where am I going? Who created me? Who placed me here? Whose am I? And these questions have been integral to the human being. Philosophers have discussed these questions throughout history. Just thinkers in general, the religious, the non-religious, everybody has engaged in this question to some extent. Even us today in the 21st century. And it's very interesting when you think of it from the perspective of the 21st century. We live in a time where, from a material perspective, we have everything. Good. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Okay, brilliant. So from a material perspective, from a worldly perspective, in the 21st century, we pretty much have everything. Most of us are really well off, especially in the West, right? Compared to the people of the past, even the kings of the past, we're doing really well. We have money, we have houses, we have a roof over our heads, we have cars, we have iPads, iPhones, fridge freezers, food on tap, running water. These luxuries, which they would have been even 100, 200 years ago, we just see them as something trivial these days, right? So from a worldly perspective, we have everything. You can say, you can argue. We have a lot of things, a lot of comforts. However, what we find is a very interesting trend, that although from a material perspective we're doing quite well as humanity, but at the very same time there seems to be something that's missing. More than ever before, people are asking questions about purpose, about meaning, about existence. A lot of people that are suffering from anxiety and depression. A lot of the depression that we see in the world today is an existential type of depression and anxiety. It's this existential angst that people are suffering from. Who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? What's the meaning of my life? Why should I continue to wake up in the morning and do what I do and get on with my life and get an education and get work if I'm just going to die? If my end is 6 foot under, being eaten by worms? These are pressing questions. And most of us, you find two types of people. You find the type of person that can easily do away with these type of questions and brush them aside and just get on with life. But then you'll have the other type of person who finds it very difficult to put these questions aside. They just can't get over them. They just can't stop thinking about them. And I don't blame them, because they're quite integral questions to our very existence. So we see this issue, we see this dichotomy, if you like, that from a material perspective we have money, we have wealth, we have material possessions, but at the same time something is missing. The rates of the consumption of drugs like Prozac, other antidepressants are on the incline, on the rise. At the very least, what this should show us is that there's a correlation here, that the human being is not being satisfied with the material, with what we have in possession from a material perspective. The human being needs something more. He's looking for something more. She's looking for something more. And these pressing questions are within every single one of us. And it's very interesting, because the world we live in today pushes and promotes the idea that you're here and you have to work up the ladder. You need to get involved in this rat race. You need to make more money, buy more things, have more possessions. This consumerist outlook on life This is the idea that's pushed to us, the American dream type of thing, right? But it's not satisfying people. It's not doing the trick. It may be satisfying a certain group of people within society who are profiting off the majority, but for the mainstream, for most of us, we realize some point down that road when we're on that journey that this isn't cutting it. This is not doing it for me. Very interesting research that's been done. There's a very interesting book by, it's called The High Price of Materialism by, what's the author's name? I don't recall his name. Tim Kassar, I think. His name was Tim Kassar. The High Price of Materialism. Very interesting book. He's done a lot of research in this phenomena and he's showing that to a certain extent, having some worldly things, yes, increases, the quality of life and people do prosper. But anything in excess of that, that's a very low amount according to his studies. Anything more than this is not necessary. If anything, is detrimental for the human being. From a social perspective, family perspective, just for the individual's life and his health. Right? And it's very interesting, the correlations that have been seen. So, the reason I wanted to start with these things and just mention these things is because we see that there is a need for the realization of what our real true purpose is. At the very least, there are these questions that human beings are asking. More so now than ever before. And what I want to do now is just quickly mention, and I'm going to go into a lot more detail regarding this later on during the talk, near the end of the talk, is that from the Islamic perspective, we know Islam, just for the non-Muslim guests here, Islam means the way of life which is submission to the will of the Creator, submitting yourself to the Creator. A Muslim is somebody who submits their will to their Creator. Now in Islam, we believe God revealed the final revelation, the Quran. And in the Quran, which we believe is the literal word of God, He encapsulates and summarizes the purpose of life of human beings. I believe it's in the 51st chapter of the Quran, verse 56, where God says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. In a very simple verse of the Quran, God summarizes it. And He says that He did not create the human beings, the jinn kind, which is a different form of creation, we don't need to discuss for today's discussion, we'll go into, and the human being, for no other reason except to worship Him, worship God. Now I know the word worship and submission and slavery may ring some bells for us in our minds because the connotations we hold with these words, that we attach to these words, are somewhat negative. But worship in Islam is something very beautiful and comprehensive, and I will touch upon this later on. But just for now, just to understand, God makes it very clear that the human being was created to worship God, which also means to know God, to have a relationship with His Creator. And the beautiful thing about the Quran is it's a holistic text. And the overall message, which everything links back to in the Quran, is worship. It's all about this core fundamental principle. God has revealed revelation throughout history. Islam wasn't a new revelation, a new way of life. It's just the final installment of the same core fundamental message God has sent throughout history for humanity. And the fundamental thing God points out in Revelation is that He created human beings to worship Him. In other words, He tells us what our purpose is. That question that eats away us on the inside, He answers that question for us. And you would expect that from the words of God. If the Creator created us for a reason and a purpose, and as a human race, we don't have that unanimous agreement on what that specific purpose is, then it makes sense that the Creator of the heavens and the earth would, if He was to reveal revelation to us and God give us guidance, He would definitely first and foremost tell us about our purpose, right? It just makes sense. And this is exactly what God does. So at the very least, for now, what we can appreciate that the human being was created with a specific purpose from the Islamic perspective, which is to worship, to submit. This is human nature. This is the purpose of our existence. From this, we can also understand that if a thing is created to do something, when we make things as human beings to do or fulfill a particular role or do a certain purpose, fulfill a particular purpose, if that thing is not in line with its purpose, it's going to break down. It's going to malfunction. Something's going to go wrong, right? Take a car, for example. You take a car, the normal cars, most cars are designed to run on petrol. Imagine one day you buy a brand new car, you fill the tank once with petrol, the next time you think, you know what? Let's put water in the tank and see what happens. I don't want to spend that much money today. What's going to happen if you put water in the tank? The car's going to break down, right? It's going to break down because the car was not designed to run off water. It was designed to run off petrol. So the human being is designed to run off worship, worshipping its Creator in particular, not worshipping the world or material possessions or material things. And it's very interesting when we think about this, because if we understand this about human nature, that the human being was created to worship, when you remove the human being from its object of worship, its true object of worship, which is God, then that human being now is looking. He's lost. He's looking for something to replace the emptiness inside. And if he can't find that ultimate objective, the real, the true being he's supposed to worship, he will end up worshipping something else or the other. And in the world we live in today, the most obvious thing in front of us is the world, the physical material world around us. And it's inevitable we'll end up following and running after these things. And this is exactly what we see people doing today. Humanity as a whole, we are just trying to fill this void, this emptiness through one material means or the other. So it all boils down to worship. Now, I'm going to touch upon this, like I said, later, but something else I want to touch upon before I go into a bit more of a specific discussion on the purpose of life from the Islamic perspective. I want to juxtapose that to what life means in the absence of God. And it's very important to do this because as human beings, we only truly appreciate something when we see the opposite of that thing. So we appreciate good when we understand what evil is and we see evil. You know, we only truly appreciate health when we've gone through an illness. Yes, we appreciate health generally, but you know the time when you suffered from some sort of illness, even if it's a common cold or flu, and you recover after 2 or 3 weeks and you can finally get out of the house again and do your normal activities, you really appreciate health. Right? You really appreciate health. So as human beings, we really truly develop an appreciation for something when we see the opposite of that particular thing. So let's have a look, just analyze for a moment the opposite of a life in the absence of God. Right? Now let me make it clear, I'm not targeting or picking on a certain worldview or ideology. That's not my objective today. I'm simply saying whether it's atheism, naturalism, some other form of ism or schism which any way of life or worldview which denies the divine, denies the creator. What does life mean on that worldview, generally speaking? And what are the logical implications on that individual for adopting such a worldview? That's what I want to analyze. It's not wishful thinking what I'm sharing. We're gonna go through a logical process and really analyze what life means in the absence of God. Right? Now, there's a few perspectives I want to touch upon this from, but let's first look at it from the perspective of ultimate hope. Now, hope, how do we define hope? Hope generally, if you look at, obviously there's no one definition for most things, but generally speaking, when you define hope, hope is the expectation of something good to happen. Okay? Hope is the expectation that something good will happen. Now, think about a worldview, an ideology, a way of life which denies God. There is no creator, there is no personal being, there is no God. But as soon as you deny God, this also means that now you live in a world which is the result of physical processes, physical happenings. Everything is explained through physical processes. I hesitate even using the word processes because when you say process, you imply there's some sort of a system in place. When you deny God, there is no creator. There's no one that intends a particular future or outcome. In the absence of God, you live in a world which is a sum of material happenings. Atoms and molecules whizzing around for millions and millions of years, colliding into each other at random. And randomly, over time, accidentally, they have thrown out what we see in the world around us today, including us as human beings. So according to such a worldview, we are just an accident, as is everything else in the world. We are just a specific arrangement of matter. Already we can start to hopefully appreciate how morbid this can get for the human being. You are just a compilation of matter, no different from the bottle that's sitting on the table right now, or the camera, or this particular table itself. You're just a different arrangement of matter. Now, in such a worldview, it's all just matter. It's all physical stuff. What does hope mean? Where do we get the concept of hope? Where do we develop this idea that we should have an expectation of something good to happen? What is good? What do we mean by good? Imagine a person on his sickbed, he's about to die, on such a worldview. Where is the ultimate hope for them? There is no ultimate hope. And it gets even more interesting, or more morbid, whichever way we want to look at this. In that worldview, in such a worldview where there is no creator and everything is a result of just random physical happenings, where is ultimate value? Where is value? You know, as human beings, we attribute value to things. For example, if I'm sitting on this table, we have this very interesting golden bottle that's sitting here, right? Now imagine every single one of you suffered from a condition where, and it's hypothetical, I'm not saying anyone does, but just imagine for a second you suffered from a condition where you had an anger problem, a very specific type of anger problem. And that was that each time you got angry, you could not calm down unless you vented your anger onto something. You released your anger onto something by smashing something. Now your doctor's giving you a hammer to carry around just to, to cure you whenever you go through such a phase or episode. Yeah. Now imagine you're in this room and suddenly you get really, really angry. You reach for the hammer. You have a choice between me and the bottle. You have to smash one thing to release your anger. I want to see a raise of hands. Who would smash the bottle? Please everyone put their hand up. Alhamdulillah. Okay, at least most of us put our hands up, yeah? The others, I don't want to know why, yeah? Nor do I want to come close to you. But most of us, the sane, rational human being, no matter who you are, from which background you come from, you would conclude that, yeah, if I had to release on either the bottle or Imran, I'm going to take it on the bottle. I'll smash the bottle. But ask yourselves the question, why? And when we normally ask ourselves the question, why, we will say one of many things. The bottle is simple, it's just a bottle, in simple terms. You are a human being. You're more complex. The bottle is simple. You're sentient, you're conscious, you're living. The bottle is a bottle. We'll come up with a whole host of different ideas and principles. But on a worldview where there is no creator, there is no God, everything is a sum of physical processes that are randomly formed and arranged everything around us today, including me and the bottle. It's all a compilation of physical stuff without any purpose or meaning or value. Then what is the difference, really, if you analyze it, between smashing me or smashing the bottle? In the grand scheme of things, on such a worldview or ideology which denies the divine, there is no difference. And this is a logical conclusion here. Because think about it, on such a worldview, everything is an arrangement of matter, just different arrangements of matter. I am an arrangement of matter, the bottle is an arrangement of matter. The only difference is we're just a different arrangement of matter, that's it. All of these principles, oh, you're conscious, you're more complex, where do we get these principles from? That value principle you've just given me there, what does that even mean on that worldview? It's just matter. Go down to the foundations, there's no difference. You're claiming a principle of something is more complex, therefore it's more valuable. That's a principle. Where'd you get this from? It means nothing on such a worldview. So if you follow through logically, the conclusion is there's no difference between taking it on me or taking it on the ball, in the grand scheme of things. But however, as human beings, we know that doesn't add up. We may not be able to logically justify it on such a worldview, but deep down inside our nature, it screams out to us and it lets us know, no, there is a difference. And this is why the human nature, God has given us a human nature. It's called the fitrah in Islam. And it's a very interesting thing. Obviously, it's not part of this discussion today, but the fitrah it contains some primary knowledge, which is already placed within human nature. And an aspect of that is knowledge of God Himself. And also some basic understanding of right or wrong and principles, such as a principle we would apply here. Every single person in this room, whoever you are, would agree it's right smashing the bottle, not right smashing me. But that conclusion, that natural innate conclusion, cannot be accounted for on a worldview in the absence of the divine or God. Let's take it a step further. Purpose. It's what we're discussing today in particular. Every single human being has a fixation on finding purpose and meaning in life. All of us do. Whether we think about it, we don't. We think about it a lot, we think about it a little. But every single human being does. On a worldview in the absence of the divine, where everything is an accident, including us, there is no ultimate purpose. Think about this. You spill milk in the morning by accident, you knock it over. What's the purpose behind that? It just happened. It was an accident. Spilled milk doesn't have a purpose. In the same way, if we are just an accident of nature, there is no purpose behind our existence, no ultimate purpose. And someone may say, well, no, that's not true. I have purpose. I want to be a doctor, I want to be an engineer, I want to get an education, I want to do charity work, I want to help humanity, X, Y, and Z. These are beautiful things. But these are This is the type of purpose that we ascribe to ourselves. This is not our ultimate purpose. This is purpose we give ourselves. We make up for ourselves as we go through life. It's just we're born into existence. We don't choose our existence. We don't choose our parents. We don't choose whether we're male or female, what color our skin is, what color our eyes are, X, Y, and Z. We see the world around us. We see people are following certain systems and ways and having jobs and getting an education, X, Y, and Z. And we just simply give ourselves a similar purpose. This is purpose we ascribe to ourselves. This is not ultimate purpose. On such a worldview which denies the divine, there is no ultimate purpose. One final perspective I want to look at this from is from the perspective of happiness. Again, happiness is almost integral to the human being as well. You know, when kids ask the why question, you know, ask anyone the why question. Why do you guys want to study in this university? Oh, I want to get a good degree. Why? I want to get a good job. Why? So I can get good money. Why? So I can have a nice house. Why? So I can be happy. Yeah, it always inevitably ends up with happiness. Every single human being desires happiness. Again, innately, intrinsically. But on a worldview which denies the Creator, I posit that there is no meaningful happiness. Let me give you guys an analogy. If everyone for a moment closes their eyes, no one cheat, everyone close your eyes. I want you to really experience this, yeah? Just to get the point across. Imagine for a second, as you're listening to me, you start to get really bored and you fall asleep. Right? Your eyes are closed already and you fall asleep. As you fall asleep, brother, close your eyes, inshallah. Keep your eyes closed, inshallah. You fall asleep, and you fall asleep, and you go into a really nice deep sleep, and the next thing you know, you wake up and you're on a plane. Hold on a second, you were in a gazebo outside in the university campus, and now you're on a plane. I want you to capture the feelings and emotions that are going on inside you right now. The thoughts, those feelings that may be going on, the worry, maybe the anxiety, maybe questions, capture all those and make a note of those. And then as you're thinking about these things, suddenly you look out the window and you see the most beautiful view you've seen in such a long time. You see the Alps, the mountains, and you see the snow caps on top of the mountains and the sun is setting and there's a beautiful orange hue and there's these low level clouds that are just, covering the top of the mountains. And it's such an amazing view. And you start to enjoy the view. Again, make a note of how you feel when you look at this. And then as you're looking at the view, suddenly the air steward or the air hostess comes to you and brings a plate of 5-star food for you. 5-course, 5-star meal. And you taste the food and it's the most amazing food you've ever tasted. And then as you're enjoying the food, and some of you guys are already smiling, yeah? So I can only imagine how this feels, right? And then as you taste this food, the next thing you know is you're sitting on the most comfortable chair you've ever sat on. Now make a note of how you feel. Everyone can open your eyes now, inshallah. Dream's over. As nice as it was, come back to reality. You're sitting in the middle of Birmingham on campus, yeah? The reality, now I want you to think about this. When you guys first fell asleep here and you woke up on the plane, what were the initial thoughts and feelings that went through your mind? What were the initial thoughts and feelings? Panic. What else? Worry. What else? Shock. Some of us probably swore, what in the world am I doing here? Who put me here? Where's this plane going? What's going on? Some of us probably got crazy, right? But then when you looked out the window and you saw the beautiful view and you saw that you enjoyed that nice food and you sat back in your chair and felt the comfort of the chair, how did that feel? That was nice, right? Now here's the analogy I'm trying to make. Life is no different. We're born into life. We don't choose our existence. We just come into this life. And we start going through life. And we as human beings have these innate fundamental questions. Who am I? Where have I come from? Where am I going? Who put me here? Where am I going to end up after this life? What's coming? Why in the world can I even ask these questions in the first place? What gave me the ability to ask these questions? Who gave me the rational faculties to engage in such thought? And then suddenly as we're going through life, you get certain small distractions. Family life, social life, money. Maybe you want to buy a car, get a house, get an education. And we temporarily maybe find happiness in these things. But the question I want to ask you is, could you truly be happy in a meaningful way if you don't have the answers to those fundamental integral questions that we all ask? And the answer is no, if we're really honest with ourselves. We may be happy on a surface level with things around us, this immediate, just surface level happiness, but we can't truly be happy unless we have the answers to these fundamental questions. And that's the way we've been designed, the human being. And for me, this is a sign. And this is the mercy of God, because He's placed this within every single human being. These little alarm bells that go off every now and then. Small little alarm bells. As soon as you veer off track of your real purpose, of your existence, an alarm bell goes off. Something doesn't feel right. Questions pop up in our minds. We have this uneasiness, this anxiety. Questions that bother us. And then we start looking. This is a mercy. And there's a beautiful verse in the Quran where God says, do not be like those that turn away from the remembrance of God. No, sorry, this is a different verse. This is another verse where God says, do not be like those who turn away from the remembrance of God, and God makes them forget themselves. So do not be like those who forgot God, and God made them forget themselves. But there's another verse where God says, those that turn away from God's remembrance, they will have a constricted, difficult life. Ma'ishatan dhanka. Now the word dhanka in the Arabic language is so beautiful and profound. The words themselves have such a depth of meaning, and even in the way they sound. Just take the word dhanka, for example. The word dhanka means a few things, but in the context of this verse, dhanka means to squeeze. To squeeze something, to a constriction, a tightness. And in this particular verse, it's a tightness, an internal tightness of the chest, of the heart, of the soul. And to straighten, you know when something is squeezed from both ends, it just like squeezes out straight, basically. It's that type of tightness. And for example, Ibn Kathir, a very famous commentator on the Quran, on this particular verse, on this specific section of the verse, he said that here, what's being referred to is that this type of person that turns away from the remembrance of his Creator, from a material perspective, he can have everything in the world. He can be wearing the nicest clothes, have the best car, the most amazing family, all the wealth in the world, live in a mansion, but deep down inside, something is going to be missing. Something is going to be eating away at him. Something is going to be pulling at him on the inside, asking these questions. Right? And dhanka, when you say the word dhanka, your throat has to close at the back when you say the word. It's a choking. You feel that type of choking even when you say the word. And the beautiful thing, and it's something I really encourage people that are studying Arabic or are looking to study Arabic, is a beautiful thing about the Arabic language, that the meaning of the words is not only encapsulated in the word itself, but even the way the word is pronounced and said. It adds to the meaning of the word itself. But that's a side tangent, right? Going back to the point that these are little alarm bells that God has put within every single human being that go off. So these questions that we ask, they're a trigger. There should be a moment of realization for us. Okay, there's something going on. I need to inquire and find out what it's really all about. I may have been distracting myself for a very long time, but it's time I find out what it's really all about. And here, now I want to just quickly go into and just briefly share what Islam has to say, what the Quran has to say regarding the purpose of life. We already mentioned the verse where God says that He did not create the human being for no other purpose except to worship Him. Now let me give you guys a bit of a context, like I said, regarding worship in Islam. Now worship in Islam, submission in Islam, submission to the will of God. I know from a 21st century perspective, when we think of the ideas such as submission, worship, conformity, following, being a follower, all of these things bring a very negative type of idea to mind, right? But worship in Islam is something beautiful. It's something that I would argue truly liberates in the true sense. And here's why. When you worship God in Islam, first and foremost, worship doesn't just mean praying 5 times a day or doing the ritualistic acts that Islam has. Yes, that's a part of worship. But worship is a whole way of life. Everything we do in our lives could be a form of worship if done in the right way, with the right intention. Even waking up in the morning and getting out of bed is a form of worship. Brushing your teeth is a form of worship. Eating breakfast is a form of worship. You can have an intention that I'm eating this breakfast, energizing my body so I can go and do good for humanity. Everything is a form of worship in Islam. And another beautiful point is that, and really think about this, I want us to really appreciate this. Think of this from the perspective of a liberal mindset. The idea that we want to be liberated as human beings. We don't want to conform or be slaves. But the reality of the human being is that as soon as the human being is born, he is a slave or she is a slave. There is no escaping this. Now you may be thinking, how is this possible? Let me give you the most extreme example. Take an individual that says, I submit to no one, I worship no one, I follow no one, I follow no system, no idea, no ideology, no person, I do what I want to do. Even such a person is in a state of worship and submission. And the clue is in him saying or her saying, I do what I want to do. They are a slave of themselves. they are submitting to themselves. They are submitting to their own desires. No one is free. Every single human being is in a state of submission and slavery. Every single human being. Whether it's a person, whether it's money, materialism, family, job, whatever it is, or even yourselves. Every single human being is in a state of slavery and submission to something in this world. What Islam does is something beautiful. Islam brings a realization and awakening to humanity, which is that, look, wake up, guys. God has created you in a very special way. He's honored you. When God created Adam, He told the angels, I'm going to create a vicegerent, a representative, a successive authority on earth. You're more than just a rearrangement of matter and molecules. Right? And when that human being now submits himself willingly to his creator, something very profound happens. As soon as the human being submits to his creator, he is no longer a slave of anything in this world. He is what you would call a free slave. And as much of a contradiction as it sounds, but it's true from a worldly perspective. As soon as the human being submits to the divine, his creator, he no longer is a slave of anything in existence. Not money, not power, not women, not cars, not X, Y, and Z, not himself or herself. He's a slave to the divine. He is free. He is truly free from the worldly perspective. That's true liberation. That's true freedom. But unfortunately, most people don't know of these concepts within Islam. Because all you hear about Islam is all of the negative stuff that's put out there. And I'm not blaming certain pockets of the media, X, Y, and Z. I would say a lot of the blame is on us Muslims as well. Because Muslims are too shy in sharing the beautiful message of Islam and the core fundamental foundational concepts of Islam. This is our responsibility. Because as much as we deserve this way of life and this truth, so do our brothers and sisters in humanity. If you're hoarding this and you think you have some sort of special privilege, you're mistaken. You're deluded, honestly. Surah Fatiha, just think about this. We read Surah Fatiha as Muslims how many times a day? 17? 17 times, 5 daily prayers at least. Every single prayer begins, every single rak'ah, the unit of prayer begins with Surah Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Quran. Look how profound this chapter is. And we think, oh, book from 1400 years ago, no relevance to the 21st century. Bring this surah, just the first few verses of it, into the context of our discussion today regarding true liberation. Very first thing, what does God say? Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All perfect thanks and praise belongs to the Creator of the heavens and the earth. Gratitude, an integral part of the human self. We want to thank as human beings. It's a part of our nature. Someone does something good for us, we thank. When people go through depression and anxiety, our psychologists, a new form of therapy that they're using is to practice gratitude. Morning, there's different protocols. Some are morning and evening, sometimes 3 times a day, X, Y, and Z. But as a human being, when we thank, deep down inside, we know I'm thanking people for the things they're doing for me. I'm thanking different things. But inevitably, these things are also dependent upon something else. So ultimate thanks and praise belongs to someone. Now think of a person from the 21st century who's woken up. He's realized life is more than just a rat race. I'm just engulfed by the material world around me. There's something more to life. I need to find out what it is. I'm open. I'm inquiring. Rationally, I'm looking into reality. Let me look at what's going on. When this type of person comes across, for example, Surah Fatiha, and he understands it, and the first thing he reads, all perfect thanks and praise belongs to God, a realization will set in naturally. Okay, this is the one who, inevitably, everything I have, through all of the means that have presented themselves in my life, through which I've got everything I have in my life, He is the one that's in control of all of these means. He is the one that created all of these means and put them in place for my benefit. So obviously, logically, rationally, intuitively makes sense that I should thank Him. I should praise Him alone. Next thing, God says, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. He introduces Himself to His creation. Imagine this person, he picks, and in the next verse he reads, that my Creator is the one who is intensely merciful, Rahman. His mercy is immediate. It's covering me right now. It's showering me right now. Everything right now, the fact that I'm listening and I can think and I can reflect and I can understand and I'm breathing, this is His mercy because I'm not in control of these processes. And His mercy is so profound. And then He's Rahim, His mercy is continuous. His mercy is complete and perfect in every way, shape or form. Now, as soon as this person now maybe gets away in this loving mercy of God and he loses himself and he thinks, I can get away with anything, it's all good. Then God reminds him of the balance. Maliki Yawmiddin, that He is the master of the Day of Judgment. Every single thing we do in this life will be held accountable for. Every single thing. Ultimate justice will be established. Oh, think about justice. Just a little bit of a sidetrack at this point. There is no ultimate justice in the absence of God, in a worldview in the absence of God. That concept, what does that concept even mean? The person that does good all of their life, say a person helps millions of people and he dies. A person kills millions of people and he dies. Is that ultimate justice? They both experience one death. There is no ultimate justice. But in the true sense, when you understand reality for what it is, God is reminding us that there is a day of judgment and every single person will be accounted for and justice will be established. So just before the person, going back to this person who's reading this, he gets carried away in the mercy and love of God, God reminds him that he is the one that will hold him to account. So don't lose that balance. God loves you. He wants best for you. He is the most merciful, but you live a just life and don't wrong anyone when you're here. And then, this is the mic drop moment I really believe they don't want most people to have. Whoever these people are, they don't want people to have this mic drop moment. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. These are some of the most profound words, if internalized and understood, the human being could ever experience. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. We rely upon. This realization is something that's inevitable when someone really and honestly goes through and understands and logically follows through with what God has just said. You alone we worship. You're the one that created everything. You're the one that maintains everything. You're the one that has all power. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no power, there is no might except the power of God. Yes, there's means in the world, there's things that are happening, there are physical laws and processes in place, but those things intrinsically have no power. All power belongs to God. He is the one that's controlling everything. He is the one that loves me and wants best for me. Then why shouldn't I worship this being? Why should I worship anything else? Why should I worship the things He is the one that's going to give me now? Why should I worship money when money comes from God? Why should I worship the provisions when provisions come from God? Logically and intuitively, the human being now aligns himself with his true purpose of existence, which is to worship his Creator. And it's so profound when we think about it, brothers and sisters, subhanAllah. And this is the reality we have to share with people. Because people are looking. I'm not saying just when you share this truth with people, they're going to accept it. Remember, our objective as Muslims is not to force Islam upon people. Our objective is to simply convey that truth, that life-giving truth that we have received. That answers those questions, provides answers to the most fundamental questions human beings ask. Just share it. You're not there to convince people. Guidance is in the hands of God. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he almost worried himself to death. And he was the most beautiful person, again, someone who's misrepresented and misunderstood. The most beautiful, soft human being that ever existed. He was so concerned about his community that he almost killed himself out of his worry. And God speaks to him in the Quran and He says, are you going to kill yourself because they don't listen to you, they don't follow you? His job was simply to deliver the message, not to worry about who is guided or who wakes up to the truth. That's in the hands of God. You simply deliver the message. And the reality is, at the end of the day, and I'm going to end at this point, rationally and logically, you may be able to convince people of anything, right? Rational discourse has been going on for a millennia, since man first stepped foot on this earth. However, getting someone to really believe something and understand the truth of something is only going to happen when they really taste it for themselves. And especially when it comes to being in line with your purpose and living out your purpose and then experiencing how that changes your life from that first person experience is what really matters. You can convince someone, oh, this is the purpose of life, this is what we were created for, they may accept it. It's like saying you can convince someone that's never tasted sugar before sugar is sweet. Logically and rationally, you may be able to convince someone, right? They'll say, oh, sugar may be sweet. But if they taste sugar for themselves, is that the same as being logically convinced? Once they've experienced it themselves, then they will know sugar is sweet, right? So and when it comes to the purpose of life and how that changes you from the Islamic perspective, it's a very experiential thing as well. They have to experience it. And for a person to put himself in the place where he's ready to experience it, that's a journey they have to be on themselves. All we're here to do is share the message, share what we believe is the truth, and just to get people to think and reflect. Because we really believe that God has given us, not only us, but the whole of humanity, this truth. And this truth of Islam is for every single human being. Right? It's a universal message for the whole of humanity, and it's for the benefit of humanity, not for the benefit of God. God is ghani, He's free of need. He doesn't need anything. He's given us this to help us and get us through this life.